I, Purva Ganguly, on behalf of HSNC Boards, Kishan Chand Cheraram Law College, welcome you all on the third day of the Alumni Webinar Series 2. I would like to request our principal, Dr. Kavita Lalchandani Madam, to address the participants.
Yeah, thank you, Purva. Speaker for today's session, Advocate Rujita Joshi, Vice Principal of our college, Dr. Bindu Varier, Dr. Kiran Sharma, other faculty members, non-teaching staff, teachers and principals from other colleges, advocates, students of our college and other colleges, dear participants, and of course I can see Advocate Joverson also in this meeting. So friends, I extend a very hearty welcome to each one for our third alumni webinar series. And really fortunate to have today with us Advocate Joshi, who is going to speak about the summary suits under Civil Procedure Code. And I think very interesting. I think a little bit technical if you see the student's point of view. Always I have seen that students are getting confused about these things. So I'm sure today's session students will be enjoying this session on very important topics. And I think their concepts regarding summary and some other provisions which we are discussing with under CPC will be more clear after this session. As you know that uh, subject in third year, but all the students are, let me tell you quickly that all the students are not from third year, some students are from first year and second year also as well. First year means now they are promoted to second year, now will be promoted to third year. So they have not studied so far about the CPC. So I just request you if you can start from the basics about discuss about the summary suits under CPC. So I think that will be a great help for the students. So with this, I again thank Advocate Joshi for being with us this morning. And for this third day of my webinar, as we know that you are also our proud alumni, and we are really feeling happy that today one of the alumni is coming and joining us in this session and delivering sessions on different topics. I think it's very important. And this thing we have started from today and we will continue this till 31st of July. And this is our second series of alumni webinar series. We have earlier, I can say before June, and then we saw that participate one more session with our alumni. So we can connect with our alumni and we can have more also. So with this, I extend a hearty welcome to one of you present over here. And thanks for being with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Participants are requested to mute themselves and turn off their video during the session. They can raise their questions relating to today's topic in the chat box only. Those who are having with the problem of chat box, they can ask the question directly to the speaker. At the end of the session, feedback form will be shared and it is mandatory to fill the feedback form. Participants are also requested to write their full name while logging in. Thank you. It gives me immense pleasure and pride to introduce our today's speaker, Advocate Rujuta Joshi. Advocate Rujuta Joshi completed her Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Statistics from St. Xavier's College, University of Mumbai. Madam has completed her LLB from KC Law College. Madam has enrolled herself with Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa in 2006. Madam is a permanent member of the Bar Association since 2012. Madam is also associated with the International Bar Association since 2014. At present, Madam is practicing as counsel in Bombay High Court. handling legal matters from various streams of litigation like civil, corporate, commercial, real estate, testamentary, administrative, writs, etc. Madam has an experience of working in leading firms like Lokhandwala Infrastructure Private Limited, Mulla and Mulla, etc., to name a few. Madam has presided as a judge for preliminary rounds and also evaluated bench memorials for the international moot court competition conducted by the International Criminal Court at The Hague along with Leiden University from 2018 to 20. Madam has also presided as a judge in many moot court and client counseling competitions in different law colleges. We are honored by your presence, Madam. Now, I would like to request Madam to share her views on today's topic, summary suits under Civil Procedure Code. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Purba. I'll be just sharing my presentation so we can now start that.
Yes.
Now, what are summary suits? The Order 37 of the Code of Civil Procedure provides for summary procedure in respect of certain suits. Now, quite literally, summary suits are those which fall under the categories of suits set out in Sub-Rule 2 of Rule 1 of Order 37. The essence of a summary suit is that the defendant is not, as in an ordinary suit, entitled as of a right to defend the suit. He must file his appearance within 10 days of service of the writ of summons upon him and apply for leave to defend within 10 days of the date of service of summons for judgment upon him. And such leave to defend will be granted only if the affidavit filed by the defendant discloses such facts as the court may deem sufficient for granting leave to the defendant to appear and defend the suit. If no leave to defend is granted, then the plaintiff is entitled to a decree. The object underlying summary procedure is to prevent unreasonable obstruction by a defendant who has no defense. Now we look at Rule 1 of the Order 37. Now if you look at your screens, Sub-Rule 1 states that the order applies to High Court, City Civil Courts and Courts of Small Causes. Sub-Rule 2 sets out the categories of cases to which this order applies. Now, a bare look at the aforesaid provisions reveals that the subject of the provisions of Sub-Rule 1, the summary procedure is applicable in respect of two classes of suits. Firstly, suits upon bills of exchange, hundis and promissory notes. And secondly, suits for recovery of debts or liquidated demand in money, which is payable by the defendant out of a written contract or an enactment or a guarantee given in respect of a debt or a liquidated demand. Now, a promissory note and bill of exchange have been defined in sections 4 and 5 of the Negotiable Instruments Act. A hundi finds mention in the Indian Stamp Act, section 2, subsection 2 thereof, defines a bill of exchange which includes a hundi. Where a suit is based on a bill of exchange, hundi or promissory notes or on a written contract, an enactment or a guarantee, initially the court will presume that such a document is genuine unless the defendant is able to show otherwise. So a doubt about the genuineness of such an instrument could be a good defense for a defendant, provided he has sufficient proof to doubt such genuineness. Now, a debt is a present obligation to pay an ascertainable sum of money, whether the amount is payable in present or in future. But a sum payable upon a contingency does not become a debt until the said contingency has happened. Now, the essential requirements of a debt are, first of all, there has to be an ascertainable or readily calculable amount. Secondly, an absolute, unqualified and present liability in regard to that amount with the obligation to pay forthwith or in future within a certain time. And the obligation must have accrued and must be subsisting and should not be that which will accrue. What is ordinarily understood by the word debt is a liability from one person to another, whether in cash or kind, secured or unsecured, whether ascertained or ascertainable, arising out of any obligations express or implied. Now, a debt has to be mathematically liquefiable. It has to be exact. It cannot be vague. It has to be quantified based on a contract. See, you can't go to court based on conjectures and surmises. You need to know exactly how much money is owed to you in order to make a claim. It is now an accepted principle that agreement in writing need not necessarily mean a document appending signatures of both parties. Documents accepted or exchanged between the parties by themselves can constitute or can be construed to be an agreement in writing. Now, the expression guarantee has been defined in Section 126 of the Contract Act. The contract of a guarantee is a contract to perform the promise or discharge the liability of a third person in case of his default. The guarantee may be either oral or written. A suit falls outside the purview of Order 37 if the relief claimed therein is based on an action, the nature of which does not fall within the classes specified in Order 37, Rule 1, Sub-Rule 2 of the Code of Civil Procedure. So if the claim is not falling within the categories mentioned in Sub-Rule 2 of Rule 1, then you obviously cannot go by way of a summary procedure. So for this purpose, it is necessary that necessary averments must be made in the plaint to give jurisdiction to the court under summary procedure. So you have to set out particularly in the plaint as to how your dispute falls under the summary procedure. The reliefs prayed for in a summary suit must be reliefs available under the summary procedure that is based on a written agreement or a negotiable instrument or as otherwise provided under Order 37. Basically, a summary suit will lie against an admitted liability. So thus the first step in filing and prosecuting a summary suit is determining whether the dispute between the parties falls within the ambit of Order 37 or not. So that's the first thing that you will have to do as the plaintiff's lawyer. Now, what is the procedure for filing and prosecuting summary suits? We will look at the next slide now, the institution of summary suits, which is Rule 2. Now, Sub-Rule 1 of Rule 2 sets out the contents that are supposed to be there in a proposed plaint. Sub-Rule 3 provides that the defendant is not entitled to defend the suit unless he enters his appearance, and if he fails to do so, then the plaintiff is entitled to a decree. The purpose and intent behind Rule 2 is to expedite the hearing and prevent unreasonable obstruction by a defendant who has no defense. But this will come into operation only if there is a proper service of summons. The Bombay High Court in Jyotsna Walia versus T.S. Parekh reported in 2007 volume 4 Maharashtra Law Journal 517 have enumerated the requirements of a summary suit. Now I'll just read out the small quote. Before answering the issue, we must note that there must be the following requirements before a summary suit would lie. There must be a concluded contract. The contract must be in writing, and the contract must contain an express or implied promise to pay. Excuse me. The period of limitation for an application for leave to defend and is 10 days from the date when the summons is served. And if the defendant does not enter appearance, he is not entitled to defend the suit. As provided in Article 118 of the Limitation Act, the court has no power to extend the time unless the court has excuse me, by a rule frame in that behalf, made Section 5 of the Limitation Act applicable to such application as has been done by the High Court of Bombay. The Madras High Court, on the other hand, is of the view that there is no power in court to excuse the delay as Section 5 of the Limitation Act is inapplicable. The plaint in a summary suit must contain the averments mentioned in clauses A and B, besides other averments, as in an ordinary plaint, and the plaint must bear the inscription mentioned in clause C of Sub-Rule 1 of the suit under Order 37 of the Code of Civil Procedure 1908. The summons in a summary suit must be in Form 4 in Appendix V or in such other form as may from time to time be prescribed. In case of a summary suit being filed before the Bombay High Court, the original side rules prescribe that the writ of summons for a summary suit must be in Form 10 as set out in the schedule of forms. If the defendant enters appearance, I'm sorry, the plaintiff has to serve on the defendant the summons for judgment under sub-rule 3 of Rule 3, and thereafter under sub-rule 5 of Rule 3, the defendant can apply for leave to defend the suit on such summons for judgment. The plaintiff can claim interest up to the date of institution of the suit in accordance with the provisions of the Interest Act, or if applicable, the Negotiable Instruments Act. Now, the rate of interest, if any, from the date of filing of the suit till that of the decree will be at a rate if it is so specified. As to the interest from the date of decree till the payment, it will be as per order section 34 of the Code of Civil Procedure. Now, the allegations made in the plaint shall be deemed to be admitted by the defendant. The effect of these words is to enable the plaintiff to succeed on his own allegations, though the allegations may be of such nature that if the defendant has appeared and denied them, then they would have to be proved by the plaintiff. So this is a presumption that what has been stated in the plaint is correct and that he is entitled to a decree based on that, provided the defendant is able to show otherwise. So thus the second step in filing and prosecuting a summary suit is to draft the appropriate plaint as specified under Order 37 and serving of the writ of summons in the prescribed form upon the defendants. Now, a proper service of writ of summons is very crucial. What is the procedure after appearance of the defendant? We will now see Rule 3 for that. Now, Sub-Rule 1 of Rule 3 provides that the plaintiff is to serve upon the defendant a copy of the plaint along with annexures, along with the writ of summons. The defendant is to file his appearance by himself or wider pleader within 10 days of service of summons and file with the court an address for service of notices on him. Sub-Rule 3 provides that the defendant is to give notice to the plaintiff of his having filed appearance. Sub-Rule 4 of Rule 3 provides that if the defendant files an appearance, then the plaintiff is to serve upon him a summons for judgment, returnable not less than 10 days from the date of service along with affidavit in support. Sub-Rule 5 provides that within 10 days of the service of summons for judgment, the defendant is to apply for leave to defend by way of an affidavit disclosing all facts and giving reason why such leave should be granted. Such such leave may be granted by the court conditionally or unconditionally, or the court may refuse to grant leave if it finds that the defense raised by the defendant is frivolous or vexatious. Further, if part of the amount claimed is admitted by the defendant, then leave to defend will not be granted until the amount admitted is deposited in court.
Excuse me, madam. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you be
Yes, ma'am.
slow because they have put a comment that it is little fast.
Okay, sure. I'm so sorry. I'll go slowly.
Yeah, please, because
Okay,
there are first year students also. Okay, please.
Yes, I understand. I'm so sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Sub-Rule 6 provides for procedure to be followed during hearing of summons for judgment. I will just go to Sub-Rule 6 now.
Yeah, slowly because they are first years also.
I understand. I'm so sorry, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, Sub-Rule 7 provides that if the court is shown sufficient cause, then it may excuse the delay in entering appearance or delay applying for leave to defend. The application for leave to appear and defend must be made within 10 days from the date of service of summons for judgment on the defendant. The expression within 10 days in Order 37 Rule 3 Sub-Rule 5 may mean that the period may be less than 10 days or at the most on the 10th day. In case a summary suit is filed before the Bombay High Court, the summons for judgment has to be in Form 11 as set out in the schedule of forms under the original side rules. Now, in a summary suit, the court judge dealing with the summary suit can proceed up to the stage of hearing of the summons for judgment and passing judgment in favor of the plaintiff if the defendant has not applied for leave to defend, or if such application has been made and refused, or if the defendant is granted conditional leave to defend fails to comply with the conditions on which leave to defend is granted. The leave to defend should ideally be given unconditionally if the defendant shows a prima facie case or raises a triable issue. Leave should be made conditional if the court doubts the bona fides of the defendant or thinks that the defense is only put in to gain time. Now, the Supreme Court in IDBI Trusteeship Services Limited versus Uptown reported in 2017 Volume 1 Supreme Court cases at 568 in paragraph 16 and 17 have set out the procedure or the conditions or principles under which a leave is to be granted. Now, till now, the courts were following the case in Mechlek Engineers, but it has now been determined by the Supreme Court that Mechlek Engineers is based on a older version of the section, whereas the earlier judgment of Milkhi Ram is based, in fact, on the newer amendment, which is why they have now set out a new set of principles which are to be followed when granting leave to defend. Now, I will quickly just read out the paragraph 17. Accordingly, the principles stated in para 8 of Mechlek case will now stand superseded, given the amendment of Order 37 Rule 3 and the binding decision of 4 judges. In Milkhi Ram case, they are setting out the principles as follows. If the defendant satisfies the court that he has a substantial defense, that is a defense that is likely to succeed, the plaintiff is not entitled to leave to sign judgment and the defendant is entitled to unconditional leave to defend. What this means is if the defendant satisfies the court that he has a substantial defense, then he should be granted unconditional leave. Secondly, if the defendant raises a tribal issue indicating that he has a fair or reasonable defense, although not a positively good defense, then too the plaintiff is not entitled to sign judgment and the defendant is ordinarily entitled to unconditional leave to defend. Sorry. Even if the defendant raises tribal issues, if a doubt is left with the trial judge about the defendant or the genuineness of the tribal issues, the trial judge may impose conditions, both as to...
Hello.
Rujuta ma'am?
Yeah, I think some network issue.
Rujuta ma'am?
Just call, no? Over.
Yes ma'am.
Audio problem, net issue.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. Just check it.
Who is calling? Huh?
Yes ma'am, I'm calling.
Yeah.
I'm calling.
By the time participants were put unknown user, please write your name.
Huh.
He is joining. Admit her.
Yeah,
Yes.
I admitted her.
Admitted.
Rujuta ma'am, you are there now?
Yeah.
Rujuta ma'am?
Table.
Again.
Hello, I think I was disconnected. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can hear you ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. I'll just share my screen. Just a moment.
Yes ma'am.
Just a moment. Yes. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am, you can hear
Yes,
me.
yes, sorry. So we were looking at the third condition. Even if the defendant raises a triable issue, if a doubt is left with the trial judge about the defendant's good faith or the genuineness of the triable issues, the trial judge may impose conditions.
Please, sorry to interrupt. We are not able to see the presentation, the screen.
1 minute, huh, ma'am? I will. 1 minute. One minute, ma'am.
Just that arrow, third one.
Ma'am, should I help
I
you?
understand. I'm somehow not able to share it.
Should I share on your behalf, ma'am?
Yes, please, if you could. I'm thankful to you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, ma'am.
Some cases are written over there. Na? IDBI trusteeship service in the chat.
No, just go to the fourth slide, which will have the second part
This
of
one, ma'am?
the second part of Rule 3.
This, just a minute, ma'am. I will. Just tell me, ma'am, where I should stop. This one, this slide you want, ma'am?
Wait, I can't see it. I can't see it. Just a moment, huh? Just a moment.
Purva, it's not visible.
Okay, ma'am. I
Go to
will
the
try
fifth
again.
slide.
Yes, ma'am. I will try again, ma'am.
Go to the
I will-
fifth slide. That will
Yeah,
have the.
yeah. I will try, ma'am. I will try.
Yes.
Can you see it now, ma'am?
No, dear, no, not at my end.
Yeah, yeah. It's seen now.
It's seen? Rujuta, ma'am, can you see?
Yes, yes, I can see now.
Now I will
Make
do
Yes.
it. You just tell me you need this slide.
The fifth slide, the one right after that.
Next one. Purva, next
Yes.
one.
Yes, yes. Next one.
And make it full screen. Huh?
Yes, ma'am, I'm doing. This one, ma'am, this slide you want?
I can't see it. Yes,
Make it
yes,
full
yes.
screen. Make it
Just a
full
minute,
screen.
ma'am. Yeah. Ma'am, see.
No, that is first one. Summary suit. Go. Second. Yeah, go next. Next.
This one?
Next. No.
Next one.
Next.
This one before this.
Here I should stop.
Yes.
This slide is okay with you, Rujuta, ma'am? Can you see?
I can't see, but I'm sure it's okay.
It is recovery of cost of noting non-acceptance of dishonored bill.
No. The second part of Rule 3.
Dr. Mulchan, what is going on?
It's okay. It is just the provision of the CPC. So I'm sure all students can go to their books and see from there. There's no difficulty. There's nothing that I've written on my, anything that's out of the syllabus or something.
Rule 3 is shown.
Rule 3.
It's right,
Yeah.
right. Procedure for the appearance of defendant.
This is fine. This is fine, Purva. This is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see now, ma'am. You just tell me. I will change the slide accordingly.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay, now we will go back to the third point that has been now proposed by the Supreme Court. Now, even if the defendant raises a triable issue, if a doubt is left with the trial judge about the defendant's good faith or the genuineness of the triable issue, the trial judge may impose conditions as to the time or mode of trial, as well as payment into court or furnishing security. As such a defense does not raise a triable issue, conditions as to deposit or security of both can extend to the entire principal sum together with such interest as the court feels the justice of the case requires. If the defendant has no substantial defense or raises no genuine triable issue, the court finds such defense to be frivolous or vexatious, then leave to defend the suit shall be refused, and the plaintiff is entitled to a judgment forthwith. If any part of the amount claimed by the plaintiff is admitted by the defendant due from him, leave to defend the suit, even if the triable issues or substantial defense is raised, shall not be granted unless the amount so admitted due is deposited by the defendant in court. Now, at the stage of granting leave to defend, the court can only consider whether the facts, if true, afford a good defense and not whether not. So obviously they are not going to the trial of the suit to determine the truth. They have to just consider whether they are good enough to grant a defense, to grant a leave. Where the defense raises a triable issue, leave should not be declined merely because of inherent implausibility or inconsistency of the defense, but leave to defend granted by the court can be revoked for want of territorial jurisdiction by the court granting leave. Now, a issue is a point which is raised by one party and denied by the other. It's a very practical and practice thing. So, if a triable issue is raised, then the defendant is likely to get leave. Where a party has been added as a pro forma defendant and no relief is claimed against him, such a party is entitled to unconditional leave to defend. Where the defense cannot be rejected outright, leave should be granted. Where the defendant has a concrete case for defense which raises a triable issue, and the defense cannot in any circumstances be termed as sham or illusory, leave to defense should not be allowed. Leave to defend should be allowed. Where leave is granted subject to deposit of specific amount within a stipulated time, the plaintiff shall be entitled to a decree forthwith if such amount is not deposited. The court has undoubtedly a discretion in the matter of granting leave. So this is very important. The court has absolute discretion in the matter of granting leave. You need to, if you're the defendant's lawyer, you want to make sure that you're able to raise a good defense enough to get leave to defend the suit. However, before proceeding to pass a decree, it will have to be seen whether the non-compliance of the court's order actually amounts to a failure on part of the defendant or not. The duty of the court in a summary proceeding is to see whether the defendant has been able to make out a strong defense so that leave can be granted without conditions, or the strength of the defense is so that such that it may be allowed to place certain conditions. The underlying objective of Order 37 is to impact credibility to financial commitments in interest of stability of business transactions and to prevent unreasonable obstructions by defendant who has no defense. Now, this is very crucial because it is deemed that the defendant has no defense, which is why you file a summary suit in the first place. Now, the plaintiff in a summary suit cannot seek amendment of the plaint by introducing an entirely new cause of action inconsistent with the earlier pleadings, where the defect in pleadings is what he is trying to correct. An entirely new case with a new cause of action inconsistent with the original pleadings cannot be allowed. The court will apply two tests for this: whether the case made out by the plaintiff is totally new based on a new set of ideas, or whether the defendant would be prejudiced if these additional facts were allowed to be pleaded, in the sense that necessary orders to make the new case would not be available. Now, no appeal is allowed under the Code of Civil Procedure from an order under this rule. But the Bombay High Court has held an appeal lies from a final judgment in a summary suit, and an appeal also lies from order refusing leave to appear and defend, or an order granting leave on terms for the order, though in terms locutory, has the effect of determining the rights of the parties and is technically a judgment from which an appeal lies under the letters patent. An appeal lies from a final judgment in a summary suit, and in an appeal, the validity of the interlocutory order may be challenged. The Bombay view is that the appeal lies against a decree in a summary suit passed against a defendant for failure to furnish security also. Appeal lies from the fact that such an order is a judgment under clause 15 of the letters patent. In a summary suit, where conditional leave to defend has been granted in terms of Order 37 Rule 3, on the failure of the defendant to furnish, failure of the defendant to fulfill the conditions in a decree, fulfill the conditions a decree is passed by the court, the said order granting conditional leave can be challenged in appeal against the decree, though revision against such an order was maintainable. Now the next step after service of writ of summons is for the defendant to come forward and file his appearance within 10 days of service of writ of summons. Once the defendant files his appearance, within the plaintiff has to serve upon his summons for judgment. Now, it is to be noted here that the CPC does not as such provide for a period of limitation for the plaintiff to file a summons for judgment after the defendant has filed his appearance, but it is expected that he will do it soon enough, as soon as possible, or however, he has to do it immediately. Now, within 10 days of service of summons for judgment, the defendant has to apply for leave to defend by way of an affidavit setting out his case in detail. This affidavit is very crucial as it will literally determine his fate. Strict timelines have been prescribed under Order 37 with the expectations that they are to be adhered to. Now, we look at the rest of the rules. Purva, could we go to rules 4 and 7? Just scroll through them. Or could we go to rule 4?
Is it okay, ma'am?
The next slide.
Next one.
This one you want?
No.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Next.
Yeah. Power to sitter side. No, 4.
Rujuta, ma'am?
4.
4. This one?
Yes. 4, please. 4.
Okay.
Yes. Now, Rule 4 provides for conditions under which a decree is set aside, and Rule 7 provides that once leave conditional or unconditional is granted, the suit proceeds like a normal suit. Now, a decree passed in a summary suit in a situation that the defendant does not file his appearance is an ex parte decree, but not in the sense as understood in Order 9 Rule 6. The procedure set out in Order 37 Rule 4 leaves no doubt that the provisions contained in Order 9 Rule 13 can have no application to a decree passed in absentia of the defendant. So Order 9 Rule 13 talks about an application made to the court in case a ex parte decree, that is a decree in the absence of the defendant, passed in a normal suit. But the conditions under which that application is filed and one that is filed under Order 37 are completely different. If a decree passed against a defendant for his not entering appearance in terms of Rule 2 is an ex parte decree in the sense that the Civil Procedure Code has used it. But instead of passing an ex parte decree, a decree is passed as if the defendant has admitted the allegations of the plaintiff. Now, this as if admitted is only made to make the decree effective, and the decree does not cease to be ex parte in the sense of Order 9 Rule 13 has used it. Order 9 Rule 13 is not applicable because Order 37 makes the summary procedure a self-contained code. And regarding the matters for which a procedure is not provided under Order 37, then the other procedure provided for other suits would be applicable as if it was a suit instituted in an ordinary manner. An application under Rule 4 of Order 37 for setting aside an ex parte decree in a summary suit is different from the one under Order 13 Rule 9. in Order 37, the defendant has to show not only the special circumstances which prevented him from appearing and applying for leave to defend, but also the facts which would entitle him for leave to defend. The special circumstances occurring in Rule 4 is not synonymous with sufficient cause as set out in Order 9, Rule 13. Where an application under this rule is granted on a condition that the defendant is to deposit a certain sum in court, and on his failure to do so, there is again an ex parte decree which is on merits and operates as res judicata. The special circumstances would take with it a cause or reason which prevents a person in such a way that it is almost impossible for him to attend the court or to perform certain acts which he is required to do. Thus, the reason or cause found in special circumstances is more strict or stringent than in sufficient cause. What would constitute special circumstances would depend on the facts of each case. Making out of special circumstances for the purpose of setting aside ex parte decree may constitute a sufficient cause, but not vice versa. Therefore, the gravity of reasons is higher in the case of special circumstances. Under Rule 4, the defendant is obliged to explain the special circumstances which prevented him from appearing in court and seek leave to defend the suit within time. In addition, he has to further show that he has a good, substantial and meritorious defense in the suit. Now, non-service of summons for judgment can be a special circumstance which entitles the defendant to get a decree set aside under Rule 4. So, under Rule 3, you have situations where you can apply to court in case you have not applied for leave to defend or you have not been able to file your appearance, etc. Whereas Rule 4 provides, if a decree is passed, then you can have it set aside under special circumstances. Now, the word special circumstances in Rule 4 must be taken to mean such circumstances which were not in existence at the time of passing of the decree, or even if they were in existence at that time, they were not brought to the notice of the court. Setting aside an ex parte decree in a summary suit under Rule 4 of Order 37 requires special circumstances to be disclosed. And special circumstances is not the same as a good case. They are two different things. You have to first of all be able to show what the special circumstances were, and you have to also show why under those special circumstances you should be granted leave to defend, because you have a good case. So you have to set that case out as well. Order 37 Rule 3 makes detailed provision for affording opportunity to the defendant if he has a good defense. So the expression special circumstances cannot be construed to mean the same thing as afford similar facility to defendant under this rule. Mere failure on part of the defendant to enter appearance or file wakalatnama is not special circumstances. The power to set aside an ex parte decree in a summary suit cannot be exercised in a casual manner, because once the plaintiff is armed with a decree, his right to execute the same cannot be denied lightly. The powers of the court to set aside an order under this rule are of the widest amplitude and can be exercised not only when there is no service of summons, but also when there is sufficient case of non-appearance. An order under Order 37 Rule 4 rejecting an application is not appealable because it is not identical with Order 9 Rule 13. So suppose if there's an ex parte decree passed against you, you make an application to have that decree set aside. If that application is rejected, then that order of rejection is not appealable further. An order, now there is no bar against an appeal in a decree passed in a summary suit. So if a decree is passed, you can file an appeal against it. Now we will, Purva, can we go 2 slides further to the slide after Rule 7? Purva, hello?
Hello, Purva.
This slide okay, ma'am?
It is 4 only.
Sujata ma'am, is this slide okay?
No, the one, 3 slides after this. The next one?
7.
The next one. The next one. Purva, next one, please.
Bombay.
Yes,
Is it okay? The Bombay High Court original side rules.
Yes, but that can't be seen on the screen, ma'am.
We can see it.
Okay, all right. No difficult.
You want to
Bombay High, ma'am, it is showing the Bombay High Court original side rules chapter.
That's exactly what I want.
Okay, okay, it can be seen. Bindu ma'am, you can see the screen now.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone can see. Yes, ma'am. Now the chapter 14 of the Bombay High Court original side rules make some special provisions for summary suits. Now, Rule 221 sets out the procedure following after filing and prosecuting a summary suit under the Order 37 of Code of Civil Procedure. Rule 222 sets out the procedure in case of part of the claim is admitted by the defendant. Rule 223 sets out the procedure in case there are more than one defendant and some have a good defense whereas others do not. Rule 224 sets out the procedure in case a defendant who has been granted conditional leave to defend is unable to comply with the directions given by the court. Rule 225 sets out the procedure for hearing summary suits in which leave to defend has been granted to the defendant. Rule 226 sets out the procedure in case a defendant does not enter his appearance. Rule 227 provides that the plaintiff has to apply for a decree within 6 months after filing of the plaint. So rules 221 to 226 more or less correspond with the rules set out in Order 37. Now, very important to note here, as I had said earlier, Order 37 does not prescribe a period of limitation for filing of summons for judgment after the defendant has entered his appearance. But Rule 227 of the Bombay High Court original side rules provides this limitation at 6 months from the filing of the plaint. So the plaintiff cannot be allowed to sit indefinitely over his rights. He has to file and move for hearing the summons for judgment within 6 months of filing of the suit. So this is not what it directly and exactly says as providing limitation as such, but it sets out a period within which you have to come and apply for a decree. So which basically means that once you've served the summons, once the defendant has filed his appearance, then within 6 months of your filing of the plaint, you have to come and you have to apply for a decree by way of a summons for judgment. So this is all that is there with respect to summary suits, and like I said earlier, there are strict timelines which are prescribed for both plaintiff and defendant. As far as summary suits are concerned, whether you're the plaintiff's lawyer or the defendant's lawyer, time is of the essence. There is absolute urgency in the matter. So if you're the plaintiff's lawyer, you have to make sure you get all your facts from him, you lodge the plaint, you serve the summons properly, keep a watch that whether the defendant is filing his appearance. Once he files his appearance, you have to immediately move for a decree. So these are timelines which are set, which you have to adhere to. If you're the defendant's lawyer, if the defendant hopefully realizes that there is a summary suit filed against him and comes to you, you have to make sure that his appearance is filed within time. In case he's not able to file appearance within time, then make the appropriate application to allow him to file such appearance. Once the appearance is filed and summons for judgment is served, you have to make sure that in the meanwhile you get from him the defense that he wishes to raise or which he feels is a good defense, and make sure that everything is filed within time properly so that to enable him to get the leave to defend. It's very crucial because, like I said earlier, the defendant is not entitled to a right to defend a suit like in an ordinary suit. So that's all. That it's a very vast topic, and this is all that I'd like to say at the moment. But show that, whether you're the defendant's or the plaintiff's lawyer, this is the procedure that has to be adhered to, and it's that way quite simple and straightforward. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, can I stop sharing, ma'am, now?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we put it for question session? Because if
Yes,
one by one, those who want to raise questions, either write it in the chat box or you can raise your hand. Accordingly, we can ask questions. It's open for participants. Yeah, participants, if you have got any question, please just wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Let them write in the chat box.
Yeah,
yes, ma'am.
they will
Absolutely.
take some time. Right.
Anyone, any question?
Participants.
I have one question.
Yeah, please raise your hand. Yeah, please. Your name and you just ask.
My name is Parag Khandar.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, hi Ruchita.
Hi, Parag.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Ruchita, just one question. I mean, it was a very good
Yes.
presentation, I must say. Superb.
Thank you
But
very
only
much.
one question comes to my mind. Let's say
Yes.
if conditional leave to defend is granted to defendant, okay,
Yes.
he don't have money to pay, nothing, he don't do it. So his right to file return statement is taken away, correct?
Uh,
Right to file, because there's a conditional leave to defend which is granted. He has no money, he can't deposit. He says I can't deposit, I don't have money, correct? So the effect is
yes.
his right to file return statement is taken away.
No, correct. What you're saying is correct, that the right to defend gets taken away if he is not able to fulfill the conditions. But we have
Correct.
also seen practically that there have been instances where the court has been, little sympathetic towards their cause and have given them time at times, if you are able to successfully
No,
show that you are willing to deposit the amount, but you do not have money right now, but you are willing to deposit the amount as and when it is made available to you.
yeah, my further, I mean, this is a part. My further question is, suppose I don't have money at all, I don't have money, court says you deposit, I say I don't have money. So what is the effect of the conditional leave to defend order? That my right to file return statement is taken away, correct? After that, plaintiff is
Yes,
entitled
my
to apply
view
for
is
the
that the decree. My view is that then the plaintiff is entitled to a decree.
correct. I agree with you. Then a step ahead. And next question is, plaintiff is entitled to ask for the decree. Now, for that purpose, for taking the decree, he has to file an affidavit. Though the order 37 says that decree has to be granted forthwith, correct? But
Yes.
still, to prove his claim, he has to file affidavit and all. Affidavit of evidence formally needs to be filed. Generally, I mean, depends on judge to judge. So if the affidavit is filed, then whether defendant's right to cross-examine and right to final argue is taken away because he has not filed written statement, or he can still cross-examine witness and argue finally.
But there will not be any cross-examination or any evidence to be filed if he is not complied with the conditions of the order granting leave to defend.
Okay, so are you suggesting that plaintiff is entitled to decree forthwith, means nothing has to be done? If he has not filed written statement, we can take a certificate from pro notary about non-deposit and I'm entitled to decree without filing affidavit?
No. See, Parag, what happens is that there are 2-3 stages. The first stage is when you are applying for the leave to defend. That's your first stage. Let's assume for a fact, or without admitting, that you've been granted conditional leave, saying that you deposit X amount in court, and only upon the deposit of such amount, you will be entitled to leave to defend yourself. That is usually how the conditional order works. So suppose if you say if you are unable to comply with the condition entirely, and if the order is conditional, then obviously what will happen is that the leave that you have been granted is taken away. It's taken back, which is why the defendant is plaintiff is entitled to decree forthwith. But like I said earlier also,
forthwith can it be interpreted?
I'm sorry.
That without forthwith, can it be interpreted in a way that plaintiff has to do nothing, not filing evidence, nothing, no final argument, straight away decree?
Usually that
I
is
mean, I'm right. Because
See,
I mean,
because-
depends on judges and judges. I've seen.
See, it is deemed that the facts mentioned in the plaint are correct, on the basis of which he is entitled to a decree, which is why this is strictly my view, which is why he is entitled to a decree forthwith. But before granting the decree also, the court has to examine properly
Correct.
whether the decree
Correct.
is to be granted forthwith or not. So I'm assuming
Correct.
that is what courts usually do. If the defendant is unable to comply with the conditions that have been set forth in the conditional order granting leave to defend.
Correct. 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 Absolutely. Because once I don't comply with that condition, my right to address on merit is gone away. I can't have anything on merit because my written statement is gone. But I feel personally that still defendant will be entitled to argue on the points of law. While taking final decree by the plaintiff, defendant can always point out the law what is there. You have taken away my right to contest the suit on merit. But on law, if I am entitled to, I can show on the face of it. That's I believe. I mean, I subject to
See, Parag, I agree with you that in a normal suit, even though the defendant is unable to file his written statement for whatever reason, he has a right to, at the stage of evidence, cross-examine the plaintiff's witness. He is even probably entitled to set forth his arguments during final arguments. But in a summary procedure, it cannot be allowed. That is my view.
That's why.
In a
Yeah,
summary
because I
procedure,
believe.
it cannot be allowed.
I
In a normal
agree.
suit, what you're saying is correct, but in a summary procedure, it cannot be allowed.
Because then forthwith words to be interpreted. I mean, we need to look for how the interpretation of the word forthwith is done, which is there in order 37. That plaintiff is entered decree forthwith. So depends on
Yes,
that.
exactly. Yes,
Thanks.
yes, correct.
Thanks, Anjana. Thank you.
Purva,
Yeah.
from the beginning,
Thank
there
you.
is
Yes, yeah.
Chat
What is the
for
exclusive, next question. What is the exclusive
Yes.
specialty of a summary suit from other forms of lawsuits available under the CPC?
I'm sorry, I did not get your question.
Yeah. What is the exclusive specialty of a summary suit from other forms of lawsuits available under the CPC?
See, the summary procedure is usually filed on cases of admitted liability. Like it said in the order, the allegations made by the plaintiff are deemed to be admitted by the defendant, which is why the provision is that the defendant does not have a right to defend himself in the first place. So even if you see the format of summons that is sent in a normal suit and a summary suit, in a normal suit, it will simply say that these are the allegations, these are the prayers that are there in the suit, and that within so and so days you come and file your written statement, or you file your appearance, file your written statement, etc. I don't exactly remember the words now, but this is how it usually is. But in a summary suit summons, it usually says that you first come and file your appearance, and it says that within 10 days you have to come and file your appearance. So it's a procedure which is different rather than the contents, so there are times when unconditional leave to defend is granted to a defendant. After that, the summary suit proceeds like a normal suit. So once the leave to defend is granted, then there is no way procedurally, there is no difference in a normal suit and a summary suit procedurally. It's the procedure which is different. It is not some law point or something or so. That is why usually for commercial transactions where there is a admitted liability, clients are usually advised that you file a summary suit because it will proceed and progress in the court faster than a normal suit. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, ma'am, next question. It has been noted in quite a series of cases without exception that the court has allowed leave to defend even in the most deserving cases only after depositing a part of the claim sought by the plaintiff. In such, what is the remedy? What is your opinion would be the best remedy if you are for the defendant?
See, for a defense, there are three scenarios when you apply for leave to defend and on the hearing of a summons for judgment. The first situation, you get unconditional leave. The second situation is you get leave but with conditions on, say, deposit of a certain amount, either full amount or part amount or however. And the third scenario is when you don't get leave at all. Now, if you're the defendant's lawyer, see, like I said earlier, the facts of each case are different. You cannot just apply a blanket rule to every case in a summary. There are times when there may be two defendants, one of whom has a very good defense, but the other doesn't have such a good defense. In fact, even in those cases, the defendant who has a good defense has been granted leave to defend, and the one who does not have a good defense has been granted conditional leave or has not been granted leave at all. Even that is possible. But if you're the defendant's lawyer, you will have to look at the case of the defendant in the first place, because technically each case is different. And it's, see, either your defendant has a defense or he doesn't have a defense. Now, if he has a good defense, then you are through. But if he just doesn't have a good defense, if he has taken the money and he has not paid it back, then there's precious little that you can do about it. I mean, you've taken the money, you've not given it back, you don't have a defense here. Something like that.
Yeah, ma'am, one more question. Can a summary
Yes, ma'am.
suit be tried after the institution of an ordinary suit with regards to the same cause of action?
No, ma'am, because like I said earlier, when you're filing a summary suit, the first step when a client comes to you is to determine whether it fits under the summary procedure, if it fits under the category set out in sub-rule 2 of Rule 1, or whether it does not. So that's the first thing you have to determine when a plaintiff comes to you, as to whether you would file it as a summary suit or not. Now, if it's a summary suit in the first place, why would you file a normal suit? You should file a summary suit and make those necessary amendments in the plaintiff. So it's my view that you should file it, determine whether or not it's a summary suit, and file it in the first place as a summary suit.
Okay.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
One at a time. Huh?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, one. Yeah, right now. Please.
Ma'am, with respect to what you just said, I had practiced.
It's not audible, I think. No? Is it audible?
No, she's not audible.
Can we go to a next? You can write it in the chat box. By the time we can ask the next one. One person was
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible? Can I ask a question, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yes.
Rajit, ma'am, the question is, a summary suit notice was received for summons 1 year by the defendant 1 year ago. The example. So he goes for that hearing a date which is set, which is after a 15-day period. So the plaintiff and the plaintiff's lawyer doesn't turn up. So the judge gives a 6 month after 6 months ka date. Again, the plaintiff doesn't turn up. Defendant puts in appearance in person, but doesn't file a reply. So in this stage, twice the plaintiff has not appeared itself, nor has the plaintiff's lawyer appeared. So where can the defendant still file a statement to defend, ma'am? Leave to defend?
See, the application for leave to defend has to be made as a reply to the summons for judgment. So like I said, there are a few stages. After the suit is filed and the summons is served, the defendant has to come and file an appearance. After the appearance is filed, then the plaintiff has to file a summons for judgment, in reply to which you have to seek leave to defend. So just by filing his appearance, the defendant still does not get entitled to ask for leave to defend. He makes an application to seek leave to defend by way of the reply to a summons for judgment. So if your plaintiff is not coming to court, there's precious little you can do besides just going to court on the dates on which the matter comes up for hearing. Okay, so you are not entitled to seek leave unless the court gives you consent to seek leave. This is how a summary procedure is different from a normal suit. In a normal suit, when it comes up for hearing, all you have to do is go and take a written statement, give it to the court. And on that basis also the court can dismiss the suit. But that is not how it works here. You have to seek leave to defend after a certain time on a certain application, which is to be made after a certain time, because it's a give and take. First the plaintiff has to do something, in response the defendant has to do whatever is set out in the order. So I hope
Yes, ma'am.
I've
Thank
answered
you.
your question.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. But the only question is in this, so once you get a notice, if a defendant gets a notice from Speed Post, that means is it a summons for judgment? That is not a summons for judgment. No, that is the first
That
step.
you will have to read the notice and see what it says.
Correct. Okay, ma'am. Thank
The
you.
summons is in the format set out by the court. The summons for judgment is in a format set out by the court. What the notice says and what form it is, all that will have to be seen by the lawyer.
Correct, ma'am. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any question? Any more question?
Any more questions?
I have a couple of questions, if I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah.
My name is Rohan Sathe.
Yeah, ask
I
one
have
by one. Huh?
questions.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly.
Hi, Rohan.
My first question is that in the event an order granting conditional leave is passed by the court and the defendant complies with the order and deposits the sum of money that is actually being asked for, the sum is deposited and the suit then progresses as any other ordinary suit.
Correct.
In such a situation, in the event the plaintiff wishes to withdraw a portion or the full amount that has been deposited by the defendant, what steps the plaintiff needs to take in such situations, and what would usually be done by the court, or what would be the conditions that would usually be imposed, or what would be the usual progress of such a application taken out by the plaintiff to withdraw the sum actually being deposited in the court, number one. And the second question pertains to the time limit of 6 months, which Ms. Joshi has categorically mentioned about the plaintiff having to file his
Apply for
the grant
decree
for
within 6 months of filing of the claim.
the period of 6 months mentioned in the original side rules. I would also
Yeah, that's only
request
the
Ms.
original
Joshi.
side rule. It's not applicable to other courts.
Yes. Now, I would also request Ms. Joshi to enlighten everyone about the full bench judgment of the Bombay High Court in the Banke Bihari case, which sets out the thresholds for this 6-month period for everyone's benefit. These are my two questions. Thanks.
Okay, now I'm very sorry, Rohan, but I have not looked at the Banke Bihari case, so I won't really be able to comment on it. But I will have a look at it and I will send a note to Bindu ma'am about it. As far as your first question is concerned, this is my personal experience, so I can't really speak for everyone. Usually, if the plaintiff wants to withdraw the amount that has been deposited, he has to make that application for withdrawal, and he is usually asked to deposit a bank guarantee of the amount that he wishes to withdraw. So in case the plaintiff loses the matter, if he loses, if he fails to prove his case in the trial, then the amount deposited by the defendant is protected. This is usually what happens. So the plaintiff makes an application for withdrawal of the amount, and the defendant accordingly he's to deposit a bank guarantee and he's allowed to withdraw the amount. Provided he and then if he actually wins the case, then different conditions are set out at that point. But this is what usually the procedure till now has been. They changed the procedure in any other way, then I wouldn't know about it as of now. So I hope I've answered your first question at least.
Yes, you most certainly have. Just a supplementary question to the first one, based on your answer. What would happen to the interest imputed on such an amount that is withdrawn by the plaintiff? Would the bank guarantee cover the calculation of interest, or what would happen to the interest that would accrue a long period of time, since we in our country unfortunately decided over a long time?
See, usually what happens is that whatever is the claim of the plaintiff, the claim amount along with whatever is the interest on that claim amount is granted to the plaintiff, and whatever is the balance, which includes the interest that has accrued when the money gets deposited, is usually returned to the defendant. This is what usually happens unless they make different provisions by way of the orders that are granted by the court. So if you withdraw the amount in entirety, then the bank guarantee that you're being given will have to include the amount of interest on those many days, so that the defendant does not lose on his part of the interest. But it all depends on how the court makes that order.
Thank you so much.
I hope I've answered your question.
Most certainly. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Bindu, ma'am.
Yeah, we can go for this vote of thanks now. Oh, no, answer the battery. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Bindu.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I will talk for him
Kiran, madam.
session.
Yes.
Because I can't resist myself, to share this good news with you all. So very happy to share with you all that our college, AC Law College, has been ranked as top leading law schools of super excellence, and the ranking is number 5th. And this ranking has been given by this competition success review, that is at global HRD of that unit. And we are the only law college in Mumbai getting this ranking. So this year we got first ranking from that another magazine, and we were ranked as 32 from all over India.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
All the top universities and colleges. We also got second and third ranking for male-female ratio, and then for fee structure. And today we got this good news while this lecture was going on, that competition success review, that ranking is out in the June 2020 issue, and we have been ranked as 5th top leading law colleges in super excellence. So I would like to congratulate to all my team, all my teaching staff, all my non-teaching staff, all my dear students, all my ex-students, and of course these alumni who are with us in all these programs. So thanks to each one of you that what we could achieve today. It's a really great, proud moment for all of us. So I'm thankful to each one of you for this achievement.
Congratulations.
KC Law College is rocking and will to the greater heights.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So happy, I thought.
Congratulations, ma'am.
Because alumni
Yes,
are also
ma'am.
there. Others
Yeah,
are
yeah.
there.
Students are there.
with us to celebrate this.
Yes.
Josen is there. Now Ruchita. All are there.
Thank
So
you.
happy to share that Casey is coming up with all your support and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for being with us. Josen is speaking, I think. Josen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, can we go ahead?
Yeah,
Madam,
please,
any more questions?
Yeah.
Of this, we are just any more questions? I think all questions are clear.
Yeah, no, one question is there in the chat
Yeah,
box.
please.
Let me read. Ruchita ma'am, please, last question for you.
Yes.
Madam, builder lobby in many cases take loan from market
Yes.
as booking amount for some development. What will be the court's view in that case, and what should the plaintiff do?
See, court's view, I really can't comment on, but it all depends on the facts of each case. The plaintiff will have to take appropriate legal advice from the lawyers. Whoever is your lawyer, you will have to take legal advice on which forum you want to go before. Because since the builder lobby and the building real estate is now pretty much governed by the RERA, you will have to take proper legal advice on which forum you would like to and you should be going before and which forum has jurisdiction. And only on that basis you will be able to go ahead with whatever you need, whatever legal action you want to take. So I can't really, give what the views the court may take, but like I said, you will have to take proper, you'll have to take proper legal advice, see which forum you are before, and then accordingly file whatever action you want to file.
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
hope
I
I've
think
answered it.
questions are over now.
Yes, ma'am.
So we
I
can
would
cut.
like to request Dr. Kiran Sharma, madam, to propose a vote of thanks. Kiran, ma'am, please.
One and all present here. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
The best and beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt by heart. Thank you is one such is prayer among them. I am greatly privileged and humbly honored to have been asked to propose vote of thanks. On behalf of Adjacency Board, respected principal, teaching and non-teaching staff, first and foremost, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Advocate Rajita Joshi for
Thank you,
accepting
ma'am.
our invitation and enlightening us on summary suits under CPC. It has been a very thoughtful session. It was explained wonderfully, very systematically, step by step sections, rules, sub rules, procedure, schedule. Difficult topic, but made it very simple. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'm
Thank
sure
you,
all
ma'am.
participants must have benefited from your lecture.
I hope so, ma'am. I really
Very
hope so.
sincere thanks to all respected principals, faculty members from the various colleges for their gracious presence here. Very sorry for the same. I express our deep gratitude to the various advocates and the dignitaries for their kind presence today. I express my heartfelt thanks to our beloved respected principal, Dr. Kavita Lal Chandani madam. Just now she shared with us a very good news about the ranking of our college that shows her true leadership. We thank you, madam, for all your support, encouragement. She always radiates a source of energy in us to organize various programs. We will ever remain grateful to you and we thank you for being with us every time. We have been fortunate to have a very dedicated vice principal, respected Dr. Bindu Varyat ma'am. Thank you, madam, for all your timely guidance, support, and coordinating all alumni lecture series nicely and always suggest various topics for organizing lectures and lecture series. Thank you so much, madam. I also express my thanks to Mrs. Purva Ganguly for her enormous cooperation and technical support for organizing this webinar. I express my heartfelt thanks to all our teaching, non-teaching staff for their great support. A special word of praise and thanks to all the participants for their active participation in this event. One again, thank you very much to one and all who assembled here for this particular webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran, madam. Thank you.
Thank
You
you for
all
all
once again. Tomorrow
Thank you,
we
madam.
will
Thank
be
you.
having advocate. Tomorrow we will be having Advocate Bapu Malcolm with us, who will be sharing his view on art of drafting and cross-examination. See you all tomorrow. Please join at 10:45 with the same link. Thank you all.
And
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
And a special request to Jobson, give us more because you are knowing who all are flourishing in High Court on various. You all, Ruchita, please send us a list of our ex-KC students who are flourishing in High Court in various aspects, because we are not practicing, we are not able to catch them up now. So you all please, because it's an idea of our principal that we should bring back all our alumni to your college in one activity or other. So under her guidance, we need your support and cooperation. Please, all of you, you can suggest us, so accordingly, madam will arrange it. Please, thank you for being with us also and giving us suggestions to improve day by day. And yesterday's comments we were reading in the group, and they want your videos, audios, how everyone is going on. Okay. So we are also happy for being with us and sharing your valuable information. Okay. Please.
Okay.
And
Ma'am,
all of you now, please participants. Yeah. Anything? Someone